Okay, so here's some of the quarter page ads. Again, we have some similar issues with these as we did with the half page. All of them appear to be different sizes, almost all of them. We've got most of them seem to be the correct document size, but then this border for the ad, I mean, that's the size of the ad. That's the border. So it's a smaller ad with a large margin. Same with this. So everybody decided that the ad should be a different size. They're all different. None of the ones that I printed out here are correct in terms of size or in terms of dimensions. Some of them are wider than they like landscape, and some of them are portrait. So which one is correct? It's in the instructions. So the correct one is the portrait, where it's higher than it is wide. So this would be something that you've got to, if you take this to the client, they're going to say you've got to completely recreate this in the correct dimensions. Okay, one of the things that I'm seeing a lot of is this where there's not enough margin between the text and the edge of the page or the text and other elements. So like here, there is a margin, but it's very, very skinny. So what's happening is that the text is closer to the margin than it is to other lines of text in the same chunk of information. So think of this as this is one chunk of information. There's a headline, and then there's some descriptive text that goes with the headline. There really should be more of a proximity between the subhead and the headline than there is between that these two have to the border. So what needs to be established on a lot of these layouts is some sort of more of a grid structure. A lot of these look like just things are sort of random, like this is a random margin here, and then there's a random margin here, and over here it's kind of the same thing. So what you want to do on a layout like this to lend some structure and make it feel organized is to use a guideline to create a margin, and then on that margin you're going to not place anything beyond that margin. Everything should align and bump up against this margin. This ad is the closest to that, but still, it's a little bit off here. Things are sort of, this one's actually not too bad because of these ruled lines look like they were measured so that they're equal spaced, but then these are all along another kind of inner margin. So that one actually is looking pretty good. It looks like there's enough margin with these social media icons. If you take a look at this, there's some breathing room. It just gives your eye a little bit of space to rest. You don't feel like it's too crowded, where the designer maybe had trouble fitting everything. But then on this, look at, there's like little slivers of white space, and you just wonder why this couldn't be spaced a little bit differently. This one is the same thing. This one again is missing those. It's missing some of the information that's required by the client. So overall, this is a pretty well organized layout. I see a definite grid structure. It's not necessarily. It's kind of using the rule of thirds in the sense that the image area totals up to about 2/3 of the entire width of the page, and you could think of it could also be horizontally divided into thirds as well. The thing with this is that the logo is really tiny at the top, and I'm not, your logo doesn't have to be huge. In fact, it shouldn't be huge, but it should be, I don't know, there's just a lot of extra space up on the top. So it makes me wonder, could the space have been designed a little bit differently? Maybe the logo should be at the bottom, and maybe the headline could be a bit larger, and take, maybe just somehow rethink that space. This one, when you think of chunks of information, like information that should be grouped together, let's go with one that's sort of working well. This one, in terms of the chunks of information. So like information or related information is forming like a visual chunk. So we've got a headline and a subhead that's kind of a visual chunk. We've got images and some captions that support that. That's kind of a visual chunk. We've got some text over here that gives some details about the how to consign. That's a visual chunk in here. And then we've got the logo and address information, social media, contact stuff. That's sort of a chunk as well. So in terms of just like organizing the information into digestible chunks and in a logical kind of way, this one's working fairly well. This one, I think, you know, if you think about this one, the logo is up here, and then there's there's not even any address information on this, but it seems like the logo and contact information, social media icons maybe should be grouped someplace along the bottom. You know, so this also, I mean, there's absolutely no margin here. The text is sitting directly on that border. So you need to build margin into your layouts. You can't, it just, in very rare circumstances would it ever be considered correct or acceptable to not have those, some kind of white space, and more than this as well. I mean, this is very thin. This is kind of okay. This is about right. This one again, you know, very, very minimal. There's more space between these two columns of text than there are between this text and that border. So really, you know, these should be brought together more, and there should be more of a consistent, little bit wider margin around this whole group of info. All right, so so that's what I'd like you to work on. I want you to rethink these. There's some technical and visual kind of fundamental principle of design sort of things that really, these need to be worked on quite a bit. Even the ones that are probably the closest to being, you know, acceptable for print, let's say the client is pretty happy with this one. Even here, you know, if I'm the client, I'm going, well, how come my logo is so small and there's all this extra space? I'm paying for all this space. And it's not, the idea isn't to cram every little bit of space and not to have any white space, but to somehow make it seem as if you're using the space efficiently without making it look crowded. So really the way to do that is there's some instructions that a tutorial that I provided for the menu design, in which I explain a lot of you know, rule of thirds and grids and columns and margins and all that stuff. And if you were to look at those videos again, you'd see that a lot of that applies to you know, any project. I mean, they can apply to any layout. You just have to see how you would adapt specifics, you know, for your specific situation. But the general principles and techniques that I'm showing you in those menu layouts are pretty applicable to all this. And that's what I was hoping that you would do, is to really start applying some of the things that you learned in the previous projects to these projects, to this project. So, okay, thank you.